Welcome to Thought Crimez, baby.
Welcome to Thought Crimez, everyone. This is your girl, Sincere.
Yo, and I am Prince Solomon. We're going to go ahead and get into it here. Ja Rule Jeffrey Atkins is out there in New York City with the citizens protesting the housing authority. Public housing residents have long complained, as reported by AllHipHop.com, about going long periods this winter season without heat and hot water in their homes. Well, Sincere, what do you think about that? Looks like Ja Rule is out there with the citizens.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I guess, people have to understand that this is taking place across the nation, especially in places that have a lot of development where they want to make it hard for the citizens to get rid of them. Like, people have to remember, sometimes public housing can even become private. They could decide to actually privatize it and sell it to a company instead of keeping it public and within the state government or the federal government. So that does take place. And then we have to remember, your boy Ben Carson, is supposed to be a head of that department.
Yeah. It's supposed to be a Negro mask.
Yeah.
He's a Negro mask for the head.
For the federal government.
Yeah, HUD.
But, a lot of people have different opinions pertaining to HUD. I'll just say this. Whether you feel public housing should exist or not, we can all agree that 99% of the people in public housing actually do work. They work, they have jobs, hardworking people, and public housing is just there because they don't have the funds, even though they work hard, to cover all the expenses needed if they was just to go and buy, an apartment outside of public housing. And we got to remember also the rise of when it comes to apartments and condos. They keep rising. Before, some places you can get an apartment for $500, $600. Now the baseline for a lot of places are $900. And that comes with inflation. I know some people in California like $900. I take $900. I take $700. But you got to understand, y'all already, are dealing with high inflation when it comes to the market, the housing market. But for a lot of people, they've been used to $600 a month, $700 a month. And it's been rising higher and higher and higher and higher. Inflation is critical, is real. You have people who are working 3 jobs and they're paying rent for $2,000. In fact, not too long ago, when we had visited New Jersey about a year and a half ago, we caught a lift. Was chopping it up with the guy, and he said, I'm paying like $2,000, $2,500, where I live. And we was like, oh, okay, so you must live somewhere decent, right? He's like, no, roaches and you know what I'm saying? So
yeah, and that's what happens.
We gotta be compassionate, but not only compassionate, logical. We always claim to not care for people in public housing because we assume they're lazy or they're trying to get one up or they're trying to keep that apartment by not working. No, they all work for the most part. Most of them work. It's just because of high inflation they can't keep up.
Yeah, and whether people want to complain about public housing or not, I'm telling you, as someone who did grow up on public housing, my folks worked. She worked, my mother worked. In fact, in many cases, they're mandated to work. There are certain stipulations they have to maintain to keep their public housing. And also, it's not only just about the idea, they don't have enough money. That is true in essence. That's why their public housing is available, which all societies have provided forms of public housing by way of the government. Even if we want to go back to Africa, they had that as well. What the government will provide for certain lands and certain special tribes, as well. And we get that type of social welfare even by way of the corporations, by way of soldiers, by way of students, immigrants. It's all there. We all participated in certain forms. It's just that people on public housing have been demonized and also campaigned against as well.
Heavy campaign.
What people also fail to realize is another aspect to this. A lot of people in public housing have mental disabilities. There's a lot of things that people who are injured, people who become paraplegic, quadriplegic. It's a far more nuanced diversity in the population as to why they're on public housing, as opposed to, they just be feeding off the government. No, there's a lot of people that are on public housing. There's men who've thrown their back out, who can no longer work. There's people who've been injured in car accidents. There's people autistic people, individuals, people who have Down syndrome. It's different. So as someone who grew up on it, and I had a chance to, when we had to have the mandatory meetings here and there, we saw the variety and the variations of both white, black, brown, and even some yellow people on public housing. That being said, though, they are being scapegoated, and whenever public housing is mentioned, they will always highlight, when they need to demonize it, they will always highlight the black populace who are on public housing.
They want that land grab too.
Yeah, so, and then you got to also understand this too, as Sin pointed out, the privatization, or privatizing, of public housing in certain cities and states also comes by way of another process that's demonstrative to the population within those areas under the guise of urban renewal, urban development. And sometimes they even market it as urban development, urban renewal, green energy programs. But really what they're doing is having some people to buy out the land, buy off the tenants, buy off the property. And when I say about the tenants, I'm talking about the owners, and have them, or cancel the contracts with the government and have them to evict all of the tenants. And then that's when you start moving in other demographics of the population into these areas where the public housing assistance were with the citizens.
Talking about how the tactics that you use to get the citizens out of the apartments by not having their heat on.
Well, yeah. And then seeing, this is the part where we're getting into with the Ja Rule situation and the people he's out there with. First, what they'll do is they'll have them to go out without water. And they'll say there's lead in the water, right? Anything to basically condemn the property. So instead of, let's fix it, what they'll say, even in a public advertisement sense, they'll say, you know what? We condemn the property. The people shouldn't be living here. And then they'll evict the tenants there, right? Many of the tenants, will they get some sort of voucher? Possibly. Some of them can't get their vouchers renewed in the process as well. They end up losing it. So many people become destitute or homeless, right? But the reason why, when you see things like this, you have to kind of be careful with the forms of solution that may come in, because they may flat outright condemn everything and then sell that property to a private entity, individual, or a conglomerate of people that are interested in the property.
While still taking poor people's money, because people forget before they even get, sometimes before they can't even come back into the apartment, they still paid that last month of rent.
Oh yeah.
Like right now, they had a whole winter with no heat and they were paying rent.
Well, it happened to us even, in Atlanta. There was a set of apartments that was next to us. It got condemned because some of the same sentiments that has been harkened here with Ja Rule and what he's, and some of these citizens, where it says 80% of these families are having these problems. That's, what we saw also in Atlanta, especially on the west side of Atlanta. And the solution was to condemn the entire complex after many people had paid their rent. Yep. And you got to understand, a lot of the people that have public house, they don't have much to work with. Do they have enough to buy groceries? Possibly, yeah. Are they have enough to put gas in their little car or bus fare? Yeah. But when they fork over money that takes a dent out of their wallet, $400, $300 in subsidized vouchers, then they have nothing to recoup on from there. And so they do end up a lot of times homeless. So
like what you're also saying too, a lot of people think they don't pay. They do pay money. They just don't pay as much as somebody who will be paying regular rent because they don't have the money to do so. So let's break down a couple of things we just said here. They do work. They do pay rent, but they're usually paying $300. For those who are really severe, I've seen it with people who have disabilities. They usually pay $100. But if you want to talk about the usual payment for most of them, let's say those who are they just can't get the money up, but they're working, usually around $300, $400, $500. $500. It's usually around that ballpark. And then for those who are really dealing with a lot with disabilities and mental issues, those people usually paying about like $100. And so people have to get rid of the stereotypes. They got to get rid of the lies. Whether you're for public housing or not, everybody gets social welfare some way, somehow. The GI Bill was able to give social welfare to a lot of white people, even though it excluded most 99.9% of black men.
And also, don't forget about the $5 Indian Act that a lot of Caucasians were able to benefit off of just by saying, oh, I am Indian.
$5 Indian Act, that's another one. And also, even outside of the GI Bill, when they had was giving homes out to white citizens for a discount charge, even for those who weren't a part of the GI Bill. They had another program. So a lot for the middle class, actually, for those people, a lot of their wealth has been, if not all of it, has been for the most part built on social welfare. Of course, you do have those who are part of the whole tycoons of the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. If you talk about Ford and other people who, who later come down the line who were able to gain money because of what their relatives did in the past. But overall, for white society, most of their money and most of their savings come from social welfare, like we talked about with immigrants. A lot of immigrants that come on vouchers.
Well, even right there, a lot of people don't understand. Like, think about it. You've been in this country for years. Your family's been in this country for generations, right? People come over who don't look like you, able to set up shops in your community, whether they're getting a beautician store, whether they're getting a convenience store. Those are programs that are allotted to them exclusively by way of the government. Yeah. Some of you all as citizens in those very same neighborhoods that they consider destitute and not economically viable, you can't get some of those same setup programs that some of these Asian immigrants are coming in and setting up these shops in your home.
Yeah, I remember an Indian guy, he was doing his Uber, he was talking, blowing up his steam. His father also gave him some money to work with.
Right.
But, he was talking about, how he was able to set up shop easily because of those vouchers and things as well. So it's definitely something that, a lot of black people need to keep in mind. It's all right to be a conservative, but it's not all right to be stupid and also one-sided. You can't say to black folks on public housing, you need to stop with the social welfare, while everybody else who have gained in their life, for the most part, most of the population have gained from social welfare. You can't have it both ways.
Yeah, it's it's just something that's very interesting, and it is a stigma. It is a stigma that black people suffer with, because I watched how black people that I saw when I had to go to these meetings as a child with my mother, I saw how black people was discussing things and how people approached them about certain stuff versus white people who are on public housing. It's nothing. And then on top of that, there's still discrimination within that. Certain people on public housing, especially black folks, they get regulated or they get predefined to a certain area that may not be all that safe for their children. Meanwhile, other groups of people have the freedom to negotiate with other lease owners, landowners, and neighborhoods that are financially affluent in some cases. There's people that make out this because just the fact that they're not black on public housing, they feel more comfortable with them.
You got Jews you have Jewish people, lower income, European Jews, or those that recently come from the Middle East. You have a lot of them on public housing, but they have a lot of talking power based off of stereotypes and also based off of perceptions where they can get ahead and not be demonized. So that's a great example.
Yeah, so I'm not all that surprising. We've seen this is happening, in New York City. We saw the uproar right now that's going on in Baltimore. We even seen it, me growing up, I've seen it in Dallas. It happens. It's in the West Coast. It's all through the United States. And usually the people's public housing who is always in question are black people. I want y'all to understand that. I'm saying that to you right now. Usually when it comes to public housing, people's public housing who is always in question, who's always having the possibility of having it removed, it's black people. Even we have the news in on the campaign of it. When they feel like questioning a particular class of black people in a certain neighborhood with their public housing, is always black folks. They never put anybody else's face, any other groups. You never hear about any other groups standing up, talking about in the middle of on the outskirts of Milwaukee that we got to fight for our public housing, because it's never in question. Again, there's a biasness across the board. So it's even beyond your arrogance to say you're against public housing or not. That's irrelevant. That's irrelevant to somebody's reality. You not for public housing. What does that have to do with what they're going through? So that's why we got to get out of our paralysis of analysis and our egoic mindset when we're looking at these things. And I'm telling you firsthand, as a child that grew up on it and experienced it firsthand, there's discrimination. There's predatory practices against people on public houses, especially black women with children, and even how a lot of black men who happen to be on public housing for other reasons, and maybe situations dealing with handicap, mental illnesses, depression, something, even family members may have died and left them that. They're some of the first ones evicted off of public housing. It's removed from them. So again, it's beyond your little trope scope of the world. Yeah, that I'm just not for it.
And one last thing we'll say before we close it up is that also, even with the demographics, a lot of people don't know what they're talking about. Actually, a large percentage of people in public housing are older people. Just like you'll have, usually in most, I'm not saying everywhere, but in most cases, you go to public housing, you have about 50% to 75% be people who are of the elderly that are still working.
Yeah.
And then you also have the lower percentages, you'll have family. And you have a lot of families, big families in public housings, like, mother, father, someone with 3 children, someone who lost their job. So that's another big portion. And then too, you do have some single men and women who are young but have had a severe injury. Yeah. Because I've been in both. I've looked and did my research, and I also been in one in Wyndham when I was paying full rent because I didn't need to be subsidized, and then also in Jersey. The demographics was almost nearly the same. The majority of them had elderly people in there. They had some young people who were injured severely, and they had a lot of families that were in those public housings that were still working too. So I don't get this whole pitchfork, vapid viciousness towards black people on public housing.
Because it's a class of citizens that the media can tell you to hate. The media can tell you, oh, this is the reason why your paycheck looks like the way it does. No, the reason why your paycheck looks like that because you probably work for a shitty company. That's why your paycheck looks like that. Oh, they're taking the jobs from us. They're on public housing. What jobs are they taking from you? Again, your jobs are decreasing because of foreign business corporate policies by your government.
That's smarter.
That has nothing to do with what's in your pocket. You know what I'm saying? So yes, of course, living in these areas, that's for the majority of what we saw. We saw old elderly women. Usually saw old elderly black women who were on public housing, who were part of the Meals on Wheels program. And when I saw people who were closer to being quote unquote young, usually they were going through mental issues as well. So it's far more nuanced in the populace. And also, that's why there's always going to be an attack, because there's an excuse. You got to understand there's a lot of money into removing a lot of these people off properties, business deals being had behind the scenes. And again, a lot of these people lose their public housing benefits by way of the process of urban renewal or urban development. And what they'll say, they'll deem a property dangerous and close it even after people have paid and they can no longer make anything happen. And then they set things up where you see what's taking place in Brooklyn right now. That's another thing they do as well. So they'll flatline the landscape, get rid of the quote unquote natives, set up a bunch of Starbucks, strip malls and everything. And it's all brand new again. And even by way of that is a form of state sponsored welfare.
And one other dirty secret that people don't want to admit to, this is happening in Washington, D.C. right now. You have people who even own their shit where eminent domain can touch them. It happened a long time ago in Seneca Village. Yeah. That became Central Park. Those people bought that part of the land. They built their homes there. They got pushed and forced out by the government. You had a mixture of urban renewal in Manhattan in the 50s, where you had a mixture of people who was on public housing and black people who owned certain areas. Both parties got pushed out. So you gotta be, come on.
Yeah. So it's just, shouts out to Ja Rule. I'm just gonna be real with you. It's a good look. He didn't have to be out there. He don't. There ain't no album dropping, and culturally, no one is that interested in Ja Rule's music. So there's really, other than him really feeling what he's feeling by being out there, and he talked about what he went through in his childhood with the experiences of the state and the system, and having to deal with aspects of public housing as well. So I can see that definitely means something to him personally. But again. It's the same old trope. Talk about public housing, and they always show black folks, but they never show you the diverse class of people and what's going on in their background as to why they're on public housing. It's far more nuanced than, they just won't take their asses to work. So again, black people on public housing, their domain is in threat, as we've seen historically, and as Sin pointed out, whether they're not on public housing, their domain is at threat as well. So it's kind of the same old, but we just, hope you all listening to this video at least get a larger breadth in your conversation, instead of just talking from the same old trope, they just not working.
And on that note, everyone leave your comment below. Don't forget to hit that bell, that notification button, so you can see our updates on our live streams and our videos that we upload. And don't forget to subscribe to Thought Crimez, share us, tell your friends about us, tell your family,
tell your mama,
tell everybody. And thank you for tuning in. Peace.
All right, peace.
Go to our Patreon for more. And don't bother me.
Are you tired of the same ridiculous corporate-backed videos trending over original content creators?
This is the real Alex Jones, as you can see.
Pants, poopy pants.
Then join Black Spot TV. Free from the chains of silly censorship and biased algorithms, you can share, explore, and view content by people like you. Black Spot TV.
Soda Flakes.
What business are you in?
I make my bread and butter. I'm pushing.
What business are you in?
I make my bread and butter. I'm pushing.
What business are you in?
I make my bread and